Are you going to ask me questions?
It is May the 20th, 1997. We're here with Russell Sheehan of the 714th Battalion and
Tank battalion.
Tank Battalion, yes sir. And my name is Slade McClendon, representing Abilene Christian University's History Department. I'd like to start just from the beginning. If you could tell us about your experiences growing up in the 20s and 30s, what your parents, your community was like.
Well, growing up, my mother wanted me to take piano lessons, which I did for 3 years. And it was a middle-class community. And I didn't care for the piano. My mother was an excellent pianist. After because I liked sports, I loved sports, which I got from my father. And the boys used to be playing baseball out in front of our house in the street when I would be called into the house and have to practice the piano. So after 3 years, the teacher said, I think he's had enough and we'll just stop, which we did. Now at that time, I lived in a small town. Actually, I can tell you the name of Springdale, Connecticut, yes. And the one and only high school was in the major town, some, I don't know, 20 miles away maybe, in Stamford, Connecticut. So, and there were so many other adjoining small communities that all of us, after we graduated from elementary school, the 8th grade, we had to go to a junior high school, which was not far from the senior high school, but it was about a half a mile away. And we went there for one term. And while I was there, I entered a ping pong tournament, which I, to this day, regret that I sort of tanked. I didn't tank, but I think I could have beaten that fellow that finally won it. I reached the semifinals, and then two of my friends from back in Springdale showed up. I don't know how they knew I was competing, because this was in the gymnasium after school. And anyway, they came in and they said, they said, Russell, what are you doing here? And suddenly, that just shook me up, I thought, yeah, what am I doing here? I was and then I got afraid. I thought, if I should do well, I'll probably have to get up and give a speech. And I was deadly afraid of getting up in front of the class or the assembly, whatnot. So anyway, I lost to this fella. I'm not sure whether it was the semifinals for the school or the final, but anyway, I lost. And to this day, I've finally I've accepted it that I was just a kid, and nervous and so forth. And but I regret, because deep down inside there's a slight feeling that I didn't give it my very best in that last match, partially due to my friends who made me nervous and started me thinking, whereas before I was doing it automatically, So anyway, I did graduate. I better jump along because we've got ground to cover. I graduated in 1939, which was a year ahead of time. That's a story in itself. I was just 17 when I graduated, and I looked about 13 or 14. But anyway, I'll leave out my sickness when I was a child and how I almost died of pneumonia and all that. Lost half a year of schooling, and then the following year they had me skip a grade, the 5th grade. Boy, I could belt the people who did that. The classes were getting too big, so they just automatically took about 5 or 6 of us and said, you're going from the 4th grade to the 6th grade. And I could give you, almost write a small book or a pamphlet on that. I'd never let any of my kids or relatives do that. Anyway, I graduated from high school, and even long before that, when I was in the 9th grade, my dad, who was not a college graduate, he was raised in humble, very humble surroundings, but very ambitious. He said to me as a 13-year-old, and I'd never been away from home, I don't know what you're going to do with your future, but you're going to go to college. And I almost started crying. I thought my father was banishing me to Siberia. When I was growing up, that was the ultimate thing, to be an outcast, to be sent to Siberia, which at that time was terrifying. And I was so shook up, you know. Well, and I think it may have affected somewhat my high school grades, which were average for the most part. I liked the sciences, and as I found out later, I was pretty good in English. And is this all going too far into the past?
You're doing great.
Okay, so anyway, I went away to school, first time away from home. The school was in a process of changing from a state college, an agricultural school in Connecticut, to a university. A lot of the buildings weren't even completed. For example, the library and so forth. And that was kind of disruptive. So I went there, and I'm not too keen about revealing this, but I went there 3 years. I had about a C average for 2 years. That 3rd year, I was studying to be a chemist. That 3rd year, I ran into some advanced chemistry courses where it was necessary to have a good mathematical background. And I didn't have it. So I was 1 point short of their requirement, which was, I believe, quality point 16. I had 15, which means there were some D's in there. I think it may have been a B or 2. I think it was a B, at least 1 B in military ROTC. But anyway, they said, we'll have to dismiss you honorably, you know, for your sake of your grades. If you go to another college, make up your deficiencies, we'll readmit you. Now this was 1942. The war was already on. And so I applied the only colleges I knew about, because none of my friends had ever been to college. None of my parents, none of my relatives. And the only person I knew was our dentist fairly well. He was a Temple University graduate. So I applied to them. And they said, we'll accept you, but anything under a C, we won't accept. So I went there, and that's in Philadelphia. Big city, you know. I didn't know a soul, nobody in that city when I went there. But the school helped me to get a room in one of these row houses with non-professionals, fellows working in the Navy Yard as welders and all that sort of thing. Anyway, first semester, they jockeyed me back. They didn't give me credit for my organic chemistry and quantitative analysis. My grades in there had been good, I mean reasonably good, C. They sent me back into like advanced general chemistry, which is first year. And I had a nice professor. He was very considerate. It was a huge room. There must have been 90 students in there. I'd never experienced that before. Anyway, I got an A in that. And then I got a B in a English literature course, and another B in something else, and then a C. but they said if you're going to major in chemistry, you have to take German. And when I was in high school, somebody convinced me to take French. So I had 3 years of French, which just went down the tubes. And so anyway, to make a long story short, I sent my results back to the University of Connecticut after the first semester. That must have been the winter of '42. And they said, you are making very good progress. If you'll go one more semester and get a B average, we'll definitely readmit you. All this time, the draft board in my hometown had given me as they did with all the students in college, especially those taking technical courses like chemistry and physics and math, a deferment until you graduate. So anyway, let's see what happened next. Oh, so I went back to Temple. I still had that bugaboo of German to take. And again, the German professor looked like a real bully. He looked like a Nazi. I mean, he was a big guy with a butch haircut, not to take anything away from you, but he was big and overpowering. And he was very demanding, and those German verbs and the way everything's reversed in a sentence, I got a D again. And I was in an advanced chemistry course, qualitative analysis. I did okay in that, I got a C. But anyway, I thought to myself, the heck with Connecticut, because this was like my 4th year in college anyway. And the draft board called me up. This time they didn't ask me what my grades were or anything. But I had decent grades in ROTC, and I'd had 2 years of it. I never wanted to be an officer. I had the mistaken attitude as a child that all officers were of a snobby caste. My own father was like, he was a warrant officer in the First World War. But I didn't think about that. I just had the feeling that I wouldn't fit in, you know. So I went into the service and got a big sheet of names to report to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, which I did. And next to my name were 3 stars or something like that. It's sitting down below in the legend. It said 3 stars. You're the acting corporal for the group. I guess they figured with my ROTC training that would cover it. Now I knew how to read maps and march, cadence march, and the rifle maneuvers and all that stuff. But I didn't know anything about. I should have gone. Looking back, I should have gone to the next higher person. If there were, I don't know if there was a sergeant on board, and said, "What do you want me to do?" And common sense now tells me I should have taken attendance of the men on my list. But I didn't know them because they were all from different cities throughout Connecticut. The train was picking them up on the way to Massachusetts. So I didn't make a good impression with that, I guess. I got up to Fort Devens, and I got off the train milling around with the other people. And lo and behold, I saw a fellow there I recognized who was already a captain. And he was one of my, not close friends, but fairly close friends. But he came from a military family. He took 4 years of ROTC at Connecticut. And his father or grandfather may have been a general, I don't know. But he had that background. And Hutch, we called him. I liked Hutch. I didn't dare go over and say, "Look at me." If he wouldn't have, I don't think he saw me. Well, he may have. But anyway, the next thing I know, broke us. I guess they made up this new unit, and we didn't know where we were going. I don't know how many there were of us, but there was about 8 or maybe 10 cars from the First World War, railroad cars, not quite cattle cars, uncomfortable as heck, stiff backs, you know, no cushioning, nothing. We traveled for either 2 or 3 nights to get from there to Oklahoma, Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. And then we found out when we got to Camp Gruber, we were all rookies, you know, that we were going to form a new outfit of this, well, they call them the 6-inch guns, rifles, not cannons. And they were about 18 or 19 feet in length. And we didn't see them right away, but they said, these weapons are self-propelled. You fellas are going to be amongst the first ever to be involved with self-propelled 6-inch guns. So anyway, this is where we're going to get basic training. They assigned me, along with other fellows, to headquarters battery. They call them batteries in the field artillery, not companies. And I was assigned to the survey section. And so I was there throughout basic training, learning how to use the transit, the aiming circle, and how to compute these, what they call MIFs, weather reports, how you adjust for windage and all that, because these guns could fire a shell about at least 15 miles, maybe 20, I'm not sure about that. Don't hold me to that. Anyway, in my group there was one fella who had been a state captain in the State Guard. And frankly, he was kind of a bully. He was a big, heavy-set guy, and a smart ass, I'll say what I thought of him. And we had another guy from Boston who was just as big, and he was from a foreign country. I mean, he was from Polish or Yugoslavian extraction, and he was pretty strong. And those two were always competing to be the head honcho in that barracks. But anyway, this guy did know a lot about the military, the one that I'm talking about. And towards the end of it, all these guys talked about was going to OCS, because every one of us had a score of better than 110. Mine was 124 or 5. I'm not quite sure about that. Anyway, I was as naive as could be, but I listened to this guy, and he was always reading the bulletin board, and he was putting down the sergeants. He treated the instruments with contempt, like that camera there. He slap it around and all like that. That infuriated me, because I was always brought up not to touch things that you don't know what you're doing. You know, you could turn the TV button on, and that's about it. Anyway. I listened to him at the break. I can almost visualize it. And I thought, geez, I'd like to get away from this guy, or, you know, apply for OCS. He found out from the bulletin board, which I said he was always reading, the OCS was closed, so none of us could go to that. I didn't want to go myself. But anyway, he said ASTP is open. And I didn't know what ASTP was. I still don't, and I went to it. That's one of the things I want to learn from this book. Who started it? What was our mission? We had rumors galore, but no facts. Anyway, so they, several weeks later, near the end of basic training, my sergeant, who lives in Colorado, by the way, I just found this out last year, he was the head of our survey section. Awful nice man. and he's still living down in Durango, I believe. But anyway, they came around with this notification, and he came over to me. He said, "Russell," he said, "you've been approved for ASTP." I was stunned. I didn't know what it was or anything. And there were only two other fellows in the whole camp, Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. So he said, we were going to make you a T5 technician, 5th grade. That would be like a corporal, slightly under a line corporal, but a technical corporal. And actually that's what I would have liked, because I guess he could see I handled the instruments with, not that I knew that much about them. I never took them apart and put them together, but I always did what he told us to do. When you turn this, you open that, and turn this thing, and I handled them with respect. This other guy, as I said, he didn't do that. So I went to ASDP, and first we had to go to what we call a STAR unit, Specialized Training and Reclassification. I still don't know what that means. In Stillwater, Oklahoma, where Oklahoma A&M was. All I remember, we had this, on the campus was this Bob Curlin, 7'1" or 2", basketball player who took them, they won the national championship. I don't know if it was the year we were there, or the year after, or the year before, but he was like God to me, I mean, God, this guy, 7'2", and so forth. Well, anyway, we were there for a while, and the thing I remember is we ate very good food, because the Air Force was stationed there too. We had Air Force chow. Well, after a while, after we left there, we got orders to go we didn't know where we were going, but we were going to Las Cruces, New Mexico. New Mexico, I thought it was New Mexico A&MA, Agricultural and Mechanic Arts. This friend of mine insists it was something else. And I'd still like to show him this booklet if I could ever find it that has that on it. But we went there, and while we were at the STAR unit, we had classes. But all they did was teach us how to write numbers neatly. I remember the teacher was teaching us, sort of engineering style. You make your twos like this. I mean, you just don't write a two. And all that kind of thing. To me, it seemed like a waste of time. But whatever they were doing, we didn't sit down with any textbooks or have any real lectures. And I don't even know if we did any marching or anything. When we got to the ASTP unit in New Mexico, then we started doing things like that, marching, field exercises, and I know, like I guess every one of us had a time where we had to lead the whole group of about 120 men in doing these push-ups and sit-ups and squat jumps and all that, and you had to do them in a certain amount of time. That was more like I would say more like an OCS type of training. But even there, we didn't have any serious classwork. At least I don't remember any. Anyway, in the spring of 44, I don't know exactly when, the higher-ups closed down the ASTP program. Somebody said it was the 8th Service Command, which was the Southwest, including your school, Texas A&M, and all those schools in Texas, and in New Mexico, and I guess Oklahoma, and maybe Arizona. Anyway, they took the whole bunch of us and shipped us to Abilene, Texas. And I got a good story for you there. uh, somebody met me, I guess at the train, in a Jeep. All I remember was those were the crummiest looking buildings, no paint on them, and it was dusty and dirty. I don't know about dirty, but dusty. And nothing growing, no trees, no vegetation to speak of. Anyway, I got there, and somebody, maybe the first sergeant, told the driver of the Jeep, take him out to the tanks. And they assigned me to, I think it was, I was in C Company, C3, third tank, you know. And oh, the noise, the tanks were all out there. I'd never seen a tank in my life, I don't think even in the movies. And the noise of about, at least 20, 30, maybe 40 tanks revving up their engines, these powerful engines. It was almost ear-splitting. And somebody said, get into the bow gunner's seat. I didn't know the bow gunner's seat from Adam. But anyway, I could see this one cover on the tank was open. So I figured, I guess I'm supposed to get in there. It's the assistant gunner, or bow gunner as they call it. So, how do you get up there? Well, I used my ingenuity. I stepped up on the treads of the tank. It wasn't moving at that time. And I got slithered into the small opening of the bow gunner's seat. And there's no comfort there. There's no armrest or anything. And I sat down, and just before I sat down, the tank driver, I don't know whether he was another smart ass, I think, but I don't put that in there. Because we know each other slightly, you know, we served together. But anyway, he started to move the tank forward. He jerked it. So I kind of fell into the seat, and I pulled the cover down. The spring was broken on it. It came down, bang, right on my third fingernail, smashed it. The pain was really strong. It turned black and blue later, and I don't know whether the nail fell off, but eventually it healed. But that was my start in the tank outfit. But as all us ASTB boys, and a lot of them were younger than I was. They were more like 18, 19, 20. So I was a little older. I was 21. But, and they were fresh out of high school. They were promised all this glorious future, I guess, and some kind of a high rating, or I don't know what. I've never talked to them, so I don't know. As I say, I have a lot of catching up to do. Up until a few years ago, I couldn't even talk about the war because I lost some dear friends. You know, not too many, but anyway. I'll take a drink of water. Let's see. Okay. During basic, no, this wasn't basic training. These fellows had been in, they were real tankers. I mean, they had basic training back in Tennessee or Kentucky. I'm not sure which. I should remember because I've read it, but I don't remember. And they were knowledgeable. They had their jobs. Those who were drivers, and they had the appropriate ratings, corporal, sergeant, what have you. We were all privates or PFCs, the guys from ASTP. So we pulled all the ladies present. I won't use the words, but we pulled all the dirty end of the stick tasks. KP, cleaning the toilets and the men's rooms, I mean, you know, things like that. However, I don't think I pulled KP more than twice. I guess because I did a good job or not. I don't know. I think we all did good jobs. I think the ASTP boys, without a doubt, every one of them that I know of, fitted in. Nobody complained. Nobody said, boy, this is a dump or anything like that. You know, after coming from a college campus with beautiful trees and grass and all that sort of thing, to this barren, dry, dusty, these barracks with no paint on them, nothing was polished or anything. And where they kept the tanks was out in the field. One of the big things they stressed was first echelon of maintenance. This is coming back to me. And that meant you went up there, I don't know how many hours a day we put on that. You were supposed to grease certain things and oil certain things and whatnot. And they didn't really teach us any of that. In my case, I was assigned as an assistant gunner and radio tender. And they just taught me the bare minimum. You push this button on the radio for something or other, I don't remember, to communicate with another tank or whatnot. And as far as I had maybe one opportunity to find out how to handle the shells in the tank. I didn't know where they had shells in there. They did. And I don't know how many. Underneath the steel floorboards, which were corrugated, I know because I think I slept on them, and I had ridges in my back from the steel, corrugation. But anyway, those shells were under there, and it wasn't maybe an inch or two from the tip of the shell to the floor of the tank. But I think somebody must have taught me or showed me this is the thing you reach down with and you pull out the shell. And then you take it in your hand, you cradle it, and you have to, first of all, you have to open the breech on the gun. And this was a 3-inch gun, 76 millimeters. So anyway, yeah, I did have a little bit of training on that. I'm not a lot, let's face it. And so I'll skip over that. There was nothing noteworthy there. We finally were assigned in the fall of 44, about maybe September or late August. We were sent to the port of embarkation, Camp Shanks in New York. And the strange thing is, I was in the men's room, and on the wall I saw names of different fellows and their units. And I saw names of guys that were in the unit where I had basic training, the field artillery. So they must have been there just a few weeks or a month or so before we were. And while I was there, I had such a breathing problem because I'm highly allergic to dust. I still am. I was born that way, and this doctor told me one time, you just picked the wrong ancestors. Who picks your ancestors? Anyway, I had nasal polyps, and I had those things removed out in the field improperly with the only equipment that the doctor had with him, which was like a long pincher, and he pinched out pieces. Well, I guess he put some anesthetic in there, pinched out pieces of the polyps, and I think that was when I was in basic training. But it's properly done with a snare by a doctor in an office. The point is that I couldn't breathe. I was like this all the time. I was a mouth, and on my medical chart it said mouth breather in case of a gas attack. I would have to be able to breathe through my mouth. So while I was at Camp Shanks, my nose was so bad, I thought I had to see the doctor. So I went on sick call. And I didn't know it. I was an innocent kid. I had no evil intentions. The first sergeant gave me the proper thing. Well, I think he knew that I had this condition. So I went to see this doctor who was, I don't know, captain or a colonel, something like that, but a real medical doctor. And he looked at my nose and so forth, and he said, "Why?" Oh, even before he did anything, he said, "I guess you'd like to get out of this outfit. They're going overseas." And I looked at him and I said, "I'm going overseas too. I'm not leaving this outfit. I just came here for relief from my nose." So then he asked me my name. He didn't even know my name. So I told him. And I guess he was sort of impressed or something that I wasn't a deadbeat trying to get out of going overseas. I had no possible thought of leaving my buddies and the guys that I knew fairly well, that I trained with. Didn't get a lot of training, but I did get 6 months or so. So anyway, I noticed this when I went overseas. I never thought of it until much later. I didn't pull any KP on board the transport, no duties. And to this day, I don't know if any of the others did or not. I think some of them may have. Because that was always kind of a mild punishment for something. So, one of the things was, and this is kind of hard to talk about, one of the sergeants, tank commanders of a different platoon from mine, I was in the first platoon, had a bed right across from me, a bunk, not a bed. There were, I think there was 5 bunks up to the ceiling. So we had very little space to sleep on it. You had to get your bag with all your equipment up there and put it somewhere, like down around your feet. Anyway, I feel like he kind of befriended me, because he probably saw that I was not as rough and ready as some of these guys. Most of these tankers came from the oil fields, the coal mines, the steel mills. They were big guys. I mean, they looked like they could have been, some of them looked like they could have been, college football players. Today they would be small, but they were all over 6 feet, mostly about 6'2", probably weighed 220, and very muscular and so forth. They had worked hard, as I say, in these different categories. And I will say they did not try to rub our noses, the college kids. They didn't hassle us too much about that we were not real men, that we couldn't take all this stuff, you know. They didn't do that. They got to know us and like us, and most of us would kid back and forth with them. I was not particularly one who kidded, but I was friendly with all of them. But this man, whom I liked quite a bit, he showed me a picture of his wife. No, it wasn't his wife, but it was his girlfriend, fiance. And she was very pretty, and he told me a lot about her and how they were going to get married and all this stuff. And I listened and he talked. Well, anyway, he was killed in Herlesheim. I didn't see it or anything, but the shell landed right inside his tank, blew up everybody. After that, I knew we were at war. Up till then, I thought, this is like the movies, you know. And let's see, where am I? Well, I think we went into combat sometime in December. It's in the paper, the 12th, the Hellcat News, rather. I don't remember the exact date. And we couldn't really, I couldn't see the enemy. We were buttoned up, as they call it, with all the hoods down. And I had the mistaken idea, oh, we're safe, we're in this big steel tank. I never had heard of these German Tiger tanks that were 15 or 20 tons heavier than ours and had much more armament and all that. And I'll admit, when I heard about them and saw them, it was scary. But they, of course, we were more maneuverable. And we got there at a time when the war was sort of winding down. We knew that the Allies were going to win, but we were in action before the Battle of Bastogne. We weren't up in that area, we were further south. And I can't tell you, we were largely in Alsace-Lorraine. And I can remember this one character was kidding with the girls in town there, you know, to get eggs from them, you know, from the chickens, because they had all these chickens and cows around there. And now the one thing that happened that stands out in my mind, and I don't know all the answers to this, and I would like to communicate with this one fellow who was in the ASTP also and was assigned to the same tank with me. I was in the turret with the tank commander and the gunner. He was down in front as a bow gunner or assistant gunner next to the tank driver. And when we entered Hildesheim, our company, C Company, as far as I know, was the first group to go into Hildesheim. And I was in tank number 3, 1, 2, 3. Our platoon leader was in tank number 1. Well, we got into the town. We had to go over a bridge, like over this canal. And we got in there, and the Germans let loose and hit that first tank. And our platoon leader, as I remember it or heard it, I didn't see it happen, was hit in the stomach with shrapnel or something. So I guess the rest of them, I don't know if the rest of them in his tank were hurt or not, but what they did was they turned around and went back over that bridge, back to their rear echelon. So okay, now we're, even though we're tank 3, we're tank number 2 in the point platoon, the first platoon. And it was getting dark, I remember. We were on this narrow, dry street with no pavement or anything like that. And a few cows and chickens wandered across the street, but you couldn't see any people, none of the natives. I guess they were all hiding in their houses or in the basements. But the Germans had, I think, my understanding is they had machine guns placed up at further down that street, not maybe 100 yards or so, in a sort of a crossfire for anybody going through there. But we didn't do anything. We sat in our tank and we looked through our periscopic sights and waited for further directions, orders. Well, tank number 2 got hit, not badly. I think it was just a mortar shell that hit the back of the tank, because we could see their marker on the backs of our tanks. We had these bright red, I believe bright red silk cloths about the width of the tank and about like that, to warn aircraft going over that we were friendly tanks, you know. And I do remember that that got hit and blew up in the air. Next thing I know, one of our members in the tank said, I think the man's name was Reed, Charlie Reed. He was in that tank, I think. Now, I don't know if he was a gunner or tank commander. I think he was a gunner at that time. He may have become tank commander later. But anyway, all of a sudden they reported this back to our captain and the other officers back there. And anyway, I think they said, get out of the tank and come to the rear. All I know is I couldn't see. I didn't have 360-degree vision. But anyway, some of them got out of that tank. This is the question in my mind. I've never asked anybody. I don't know the answer, if they all got out or not. I think they did. But I believe they all ran back past our tank towards the rear. So now tank 3, my tank, was number 1. We were the point. It was getting darker and darker. And anyway, we assumed that that tank had none of our men in it, tank number 2. And there was kind of a group discussion. Our tank commander, truthfully, he was a very fine man, very religious, used to read the Bible all the time, and he was a very sincere man, but he was nervous. He didn't know what to do. I think he tried to find out from the captain and whatnot. But that tank started to move, and it was jerking like somebody who was not familiar with it was driving it. And somebody, I don't know who, wasn't me, and it wasn't the tank commander, but one of the other 3 guys said, hey, they're stealing Reed's tank, the Germans. They were directly in front of us. They could have gotten into the front of that tank and we wouldn't have seen them because it's depressed. The turret covered that. Again, I don't know whether the Germans, all I know is that it was a sort of a group opinion. Hey, we've got to knock out that tank, because if the Germans are stealing it, they would go forward about 50 or 75 feet, and they would go around the corner and come back and attack the rear of our tanks. You know, being an American tank, unless somebody notified them, they could wipe out some of our tanks. So anyway, to make a long story short, I thought, I'm going to get ready. I got a shell out, armor piercing. And the gunner and I opened a breach and put that armor piercing, I can remember just how you push it in there. And I think we set it on fuse quick or something. And he fired the gun, he aimed the gun right at the tank number 2, American tank. And I think they were $80,000. And he fired at it and went bang right through the engine compartment, which is in the rear of the tank. And it was in front of us. And that stopped that tank dead in its tracks. And I would love to know the full story of who was driving that tank. Did all our men get out? I think they did. But then it was getting darker and colder. So finally the higher-up said that we should leave Herlesheim. And I don't think until much later they found out that von Rundstedt had 2 of his crack outfits in that sector. That's another thing I don't know about for sure. Marshal von Rundstedt of the Germans, you know. and because they were trying to counteroffensive not only at Bastogne, but I think in our area too. And we got out of there. Boy, I did a lot of praying. I guess we all did. Because we were the sort of like the first ones in, the last ones out. It was dark, getting dark then. I remember that was quite dark. And we got out. We had to cross over that bridge, and I prayed that the Germans wouldn't knock out that bridge over the canal, because we would have had to get out of the tank and, I don't know about swim across that canal. This was the middle of the winter. That was in January. But we got back and we gathered all the tanks together, what was left of them. And this is where my mind goes blank. I don't remember. I only heard about certain tanks that got hit. As I say, our platoon leader was out of the war. He got hit in the stomach. And so I did hear that. I guess that's true. I guess he lived, I don't know. But that other tank, or that bandit, became sort of a friend going overseas. His tank, they were all killed. So, but then things settled down. I don't know. Of course, there were other outfits around us that I didn't know about. CCA, CCB, and whatnot. And all I know is the next thing I know, our next assignment, as I remember, was to go to Colmar, France, which we did. And I think at that time we were part of General Patton's group, who went from the 7th to the 3rd Army. And we made terrific time because he was a pusher. And the Germans were beginning to crack, you know. And I don't remember anything special about Colmar except that I forget whether it was there or that we started seeing Germans laying down their weapons. They were what I would call old men. They were young compared to me now. I mean, guys in their late 50s, pot bellies and so forth. They drunk a lot of beer. You knew they weren't kids. And teenagers, 13, 14, 15. And they were just throwing their helmets down and their rifles and all that stuff. And I had been warned, we all had been warned, don't try to get any souvenirs because Germans booby-trapped them. This was shortly after that massacre at I can't remember the town. I was in the Stars and Stripes newspaper. That the Germans lined up all their captives and just shot them down one after another with a machine gun. So I thought, I don't trust these guys. I don't want any souvenirs. I'd like to come out of this war alive. And as I say, after that, we kept moving. We went through a lot of towns that were close to Germany. I guess I knew that the next thing we had to do was cross the Rhine River. Well, anyway, before we crossed the Rhine, and here's where I kind of blank out, I was reassigned to a different tank. I mean a different platoon. I think it was the 3rd platoon, rather than the so-called fighting first, which I had been in. And I don't know why I thought it was a promotion. I thought I was becoming a sergeant. And I'd stand up in the turret, you know. This is back, sort of like in the rear. We were kind of in the rear while new guys came in from the United States from the repo depot, the replacement depot. Anyway, one day the at that time, first sergeant, I think, was his title. Later on, he got a battlefield commission. He's was either a second lieutenant or a first lieutenant. He came over to me, and I do remember that I started. It's hard to talk about. I saw these bombers going overhead, American bombers. And I had tears in my eyes, you know. We're winning this war. Finally. Anyway, somebody may have seen me shedding a few tears, and he's not tough enough. Anyway, the first sergeant came to me and said, I'd like you to come with me. I didn't even have enough sense to ask him where we're going. Maybe I did, and he said, you'll see. So he took me to what apparently was a field hospital, temporary tent with men and women, probably nurses and doctors, although I don't remember any markings. They probably had them. That's the last I saw of the outfit. I know I went to different hospitals in France. I think I went to Marseille. And then, as I say, this was only about 5 weeks before the war ended in Europe. I do know that I was in a hospital in Georgia. I don't know why. I guess I'd never been to Georgia, but it seems to me I remember being in some hospital in Georgia for a while, not very long. And then they sent me from there back to Massachusetts by train. And I was hallucinating terribly. And this is a confidential story. I don't think I'd want this in the book. But when we got to Washington, D.C., we passed through Washington, I started to get dressed. And one of the sergeants or whatever said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to the White House." As a kid, I read the lives of some of the presidents. And in my disturbed condition, I thought I was supposed to go to the White House, that I'm the president. Well, he talked me out of it. There was a little bit of mentality, common sense, that he said, "You don't want to go there." And he was very soft-spoken. So I got back in bed, but I do remember that. As a kid, I read these books and so forth. And they were heroes. Nowadays, kids don't have heroes, which is a shame because there's some legitimate heroes out there. But anyway, I was sent to Cushing General Hospital in Framingham, Massachusetts. I couldn't think of it. That's the first time I thought of the name of the hospital. And apparently, while I was there, I didn't know this, but the man we call Smokey Joe, who was the battalion commander, was in the same hospital. He had been wounded in the thigh with shrapnel or something, or they broke his knee was shattered, I don't know. But he was the only one there that I never saw anybody that I knew from any place. And I saw a lot of guys that were, some of them would just sit in a corner and they'd be there all day, you know. But while I was there, I remember one thing vividly. They gave me a spinal tap, thinking I might have had brain damage. And boy, I'm telling you, I had the worst headache. I've ever experienced for about 2 weeks. God, that hurt. My wife has these headaches right now. She had a myelogram done 3 years ago, and then she had back surgery, which didn't pan out. She still has these headaches, but her spine is okay. But to get back to me, that's about the only thing I remember there. Except that there was a man there, and I was wacky, as I said. In facial features, he resembled Bob Hope, only a much older, tired, sicker Bob Hope. And that name Hope was the key thing with me, not him, because I never talked to him. I don't think he ever talked to anybody. He just sat there in a corner and did nothing, as I could see. And while I was there, I didn't know this till, I don't know how much later. I guess after I was out of the service, maybe a year or two later, that President Roosevelt died in April. I didn't know about that. We didn't see any newspapers or anything. In July or August, whenever it was, they dropped the atomic bombs. I didn't know anything about that. In fact, I didn't know when the war actually ended in the East, you know, on the Far East against Japan. But anyway, in late September, they discharged me, but before they discharged me, they had a very small ceremony. And I don't know if it was then or not, but I was showing somebody there how to assume a prone position with your rifle. And as I did so, and I've often thought, you were showing off, you should never show off. The rifle bounced up and broke off half of this tooth. That's a minor thing. I got it fixed, okay. But while I was there, just before I got out, they had a little ceremony. They gave me my honorable discharge, certified disability, and they also presented me with a good conduct medal. And I treasure that thing. As I say, I had no visible wounds. But anybody could see I was a zombie, pretty much. Even when they discharged me, and like an idiot, I think I went for a job as a chemist in my hometown. I went back to my parents' home, Stanford. I thought, well, I've got to go to work. So I applied to the American Cyanamid Company, which is, I guess, still a big chemical company. And I did get a job there as a lab assistant. And I worked in an area with just a few other fellows. Somebody said we were making something for the atomic bomb, and it was highly secret. To this day, no names were ever mentioned about chemicals. They were all numbers. And I do know at the beginning of the week, what's that car that people use to go to on picnics? We never had one. Oh God, my memory fails me on this. Station wagon, yeah. A station wagon would come up to our building, which was in the back of the main building, kind of in a wooded area. And they would deliver, I think there were two, like about 5-gallon cans. Either they delivered them or they received them. No particular, maybe there were a lot of numbers on there, black cans, I don't know what it was. But anyway, I told them when I went to work there that I would only work until college started again mid-year, because when I got out, it was late September, and I didn't know that I was so sick. And I don't know whether I should go into this, the mess I made of going back to college after I left this job. My advisor was a chemistry professor and kind of a goofy guy. He talked sort of like I did. The story was that one time in a laboratory, he had a beaker, probably a 400 milliliter beaker of water on his work area, and someone advertently or inadvertently switched it with a beaker of concentrated sodium hydroxide, which is lye. And he drank that stuff, and I suppose he coughed it up immediately, but it damaged his vocal cords. And it was a favorite thing at Temple that people would mimic him. I had the greatest respect for that man. I should hate him because what he did to me. He was assigned as my advisor. And when I went into his office, and Temple was a poor school, really, although they're growing, but basically they're certainly not like University of Pennsylvania or Princeton, Yale, Harvard, or something like that. Well, they have tough teachers, and their academic standards are high. But he called me into their chemistry office, and I'm sitting there, and he said, like this, "Well, what are you going to take?" He didn't ask me where I've been, what I was doing, what happened to me, nothing. But anyway, he went over while I was there, and he may have, he was sharp, so he suspected, and now that I got some of my intelligence back, I think he went over deliberately and got this Beilstein, which, if you know anything about organic chemistry, God knows how many editions they have now in volumes. There were about 20 or 30 at that time in this cabinet. He got one of these books that's about that thick. He brought it over. I'm sitting there, I'm trying to write down what I should take, second year German or something, even though I had D's in my first year and everything. He comes over and he takes this book, opens it, and drops it. And I think the normal person would jump up and say, "What are you doing? Why did you do that?" I just sat there like a semi-zombie. I did nothing. I said nothing to him, I think he was testing my nervous system and emotional system and whatnot. So anyway, he lined me up with the courses that theoretically a healthy person would take after what they'd had previously. And he put me, I believe, I'm not sure of this, advanced organic chemistry, physics, which had a lot of math in it, and our physics teacher, who was an MIT graduate. Anyway, and I never could get that theory of gravitation, the acceleration, F equals ma or whatever, I don't remember. Because I couldn't handle the fractions that are involved and so forth. Anyway, he gives me advanced organic physics, second year German. I don't think he put a softie in there at all. So for the first time, I actually flunked 2, maybe 3 subjects. I have my records at home, I don't know. Nobody said anything to me with those lousy grades. And they gave me a chance to repeat it the next semester. I didn't do any better. Maybe a little bit. Oh, I think they stuck an English course in there. And I got a B in that. And maybe, psychology. I got a passing grade in that, a C or a B. But any other technical, advanced chemistry, physics, math. Oh, I did well, as I recall, in analytical geometry, where you see the spatial things. And my math teacher was very good, and that had a lot to do with it. But anyway, I wasn't doing well. So finally, somebody, the dean, called me to the office one day. And I'm standing there. I always wore not a suit, but a jacket. Most of the Temple students, I won't criticize them, but they didn't dress like semi-professional people, in my opinion. I mean, they'd come in there dressed any old way, actually. But anyway, I always wore a sport jacket, a shirt and tie, slacks to class. Well, anyway, the dean, I stood in front of the dean, and he said, he looked at the record, he said, Russell, you can't go on this way. We can't permit you to stay here. Unless, he held out a little hope. He said, unless you're willing to change your major from chemistry to English. Because he said, I've looked at your high school record. Finally, somebody looked at, I didn't particularly care that much about English, although I like to read and so forth. But I had decent grades. No A's, but a lot of B's and a few C's. So he said, I'll let you stay here if you switch to English. Well, in my mind, I was so relieved, because I was terrified of him to begin with. He was very professorial, snow white hair and dark suit, Princeton graduate. He had written a book on organic chemistry and all that. He kind of was intimidating, but he was pretty gentle. Anyway, he said, I'll let you stay if you switch to English, which I did. And I went to summer school, and I went whipped right through 4 courses in summer school. So I darn near graduated. I graduated in '48. And if I did, well, I wouldn't have graduated from anything if that hadn't have happened. And I, even though I was a mediocre typist and didn't own a typewriter, I wrote out all my not term papers, but papers for every English course in literature. Study Milton, Shakespeare, Byron, all those people. And I read the things, and I wrote these papers in longhand with my lousy penmanship. The teachers, I think, were kind to me. Well, my spelling was always excellent, and my punctuation was good. I didn't know a thing about footnoting, and I never had a course in that. Opsite and this and that, IBAID and all this. I didn't have that. So, but anyway, I got my degree in, I guess, the winter of '48. After having started college at a different school in Connecticut in '39. Of course, you've got the war in there and the after effects. But it's amazing to me, I never thought that I might have been in the wrong field because of the lack of that course in fractions. If I'd had a tutor and caught up with that, because in high school I had problems with algebra where we got into logarithms and things of that nature. And so my math grades in high school were not too good. But I did, as I say, I think I got a B in analytical geometry, not chemistry. So anyway, I think I'm kind of running out of gas, and you're probably tired of hearing me.
I was, usually there's some follow-up questions, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
Was there anything special you wanted to say about the base in England before y'all came over?
Oh, Tidworth Barracks. Nothing real special. I do remember going on there was a couple of things. I did go on a weekend pass once. I think I was alone, but I can't believe that, because I wasn't the type of person to travel alone, especially during blackout, to go to London in the blackout. But I remember going down this street. Well, two things I remember about England. Oh, there's more than two. One, that I think a prostitute, I may have passed a house of prostitution, I don't know, but this female voice said something like, "Hi, soldier." Like that, you know. Well, I was more scared than anything, and I just kept going. That I remember. It was pitch dark. I couldn't see anything. The other thing I remember is being in London when one of those buzz bombs came over and landed in the outskirts of London, and I was talking to a soldier from maybe Australia, I don't know, but the sidewalk just shook like that. And the other thing I remember is, I don't know if that was the same weekend pass or not, I went to Westminster Abbey, and I was so awestruck when I went in there and saw of course Churchill was still living, but the man who had been Prime Minister, who came back from Munich, Germany, with that piece of paper from Hitler, which was like toilet paper, you know. He said, "Peace in our time," with, I forget what he called Hitler, but he gave him a big title, you know, Prime Minister or General or whatever it was. And this was only about 2 or 3 years later. Here was his crypt in the ground in Westminster. The brass still highly polished. His name, date of birth, death, and so forth. You know, I could have wept at the thought that this man was duped by that fiend, you know. But then also in there, they had the Poets' Corner. God, it seems like all of civilization is buried in Westminster. Shakespeare, Milton, all the prime ministers, Thackeray, Disraeli, you name it, famous poets, Byron, Keats, Shelley, what have you, you know. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't take that place in, you know. And I saw the changing of the guard. That was impressive. And that's about it. And then I didn't know this till years later. I read it in our paper that on the way over from England or Southampton, wherever we left, to France, and we went up this river, and the boat in back of us carrying soldiers hit a mine and blew up. I didn't know that. I read that. So
Well, I know you got.
I'm lucky to be here today. For a variety of reasons. I didn't even mention any of my present sicknesses, health conditions. But
well, we're glad we got to talk to you.
Yeah.
I know you've got an appointment.
Yeah.
So we'll let you
I'll just take a drink of water.
go. Just curious. Okay.
The Liberty ship, you mean?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
No, the ship that brought the troops over from New York.
Oh, yeah, that was a Liberty, the so-called Liberty battleship. And they had, I guess, 900 or 9,000 troops on there. There were a lot of them anyway.
Well, thank you so much.